human development. Actually, let me give you just a brief what the whole part of the lecture series are all about is some kind of a to provide an overview and to give you an insight of the nexus between demographic factors and the economic development factors. And in terms of the economic factors, this is to pave the way for the future of Asia, which you know that all Asian countries are trying to reposition itself towards international competitiveness. This is both in Japan and elsewhere in Asia. Okay, and if you please take a look at the slide 3, relations between demography, aging, and GDP. Okay, this is based on a notion by an economist, but I'm not an economist, but this is going to give you an idea how the demographic dividend, which they say if we have a very good size of the population in the labor force, would contribute to a good GDP. So this is the slide here, the third slide will show you how they said that the Asian miracles was contributed by demographic factors. See, the GDP equal the GDP employed and employed working age population. That is the economic component of the GDP, which means that the economic components of the GDP includes both the employed, which means the working age population, and then the demographic component. The WAP is the working age population divided by the population. So this is how the way they calculate. Maybe when you return back home, you try to do how you figure the GDP in years that has passed and put the figures of the working age population and tell to see if this reflects in terms of demographic dividend or not. Okay. And then this is going to be in terms of the concept, the key concept that we said last time. What is demographic dividend? Okay. This concept is based on the theory of demographic transition. Last time, Professor Oshia has explained the concept of demographic transition. We hope that you still remember that. Okay. And demographic dividend incurred only in the middle part of the demographic transition. Okay. In the slide 4. It occurs, this is the first demographic dividend. It occurs when a falling birth rate, the fertility rate or birth rate falling, and the age distribution of the population has affected. So there will be some kind of fertility decline, birth rate decline, and then a decline in population growth. So when the birth rate declines, it means that less people are being born. So that's why the population growth is declining. And then the decline in the dependency ratio. Dependency ratio is dependency refers to the young people, the young population, and the elderly population. The young population is those below 15, and the elderly it varies from country to country. Japan, I think, is about 64 and above, but in others would be some kind of 60 and above. This is the elderly people. Combine them together, we call it dependency people, and the ratio is that the dependency ratio will increase, while the labor force ratio is declining. So the demographic dividend, we will see that there will be, if the curve of the people in the labor force is up. Okay, and the curve, the line of the dependency, when we combine the young people and the elderly people together, the line would go down like this. So in the middle part is like about a population that goes to the contribution of the size of the population to the economy. But the terms of demographic dividend itself doesn't limit to the size of the population in the workforce age, but also the quality of the people in the labor force. So you will see that in many countries, they have a large size of people in the labor force, like in developing countries, like for example, in Laos, PDR, they have a very big size of people in the labor force, but their GDP is so very little. That the explanation is the quality of the people in the labor force or the working people. So the key factor, the key concept for the demographic dividend is the quality of the people at the working age. Not only the size, but the quality. And this quality, there are two concepts. First, they must have a very good competency. They must be very competent, good qualification to do whatever the economy is changing. Like when we had the economic crisis, if we don't have a good quality of people in the working age, it's very hard to get a U-turn, or it may be a flat. After the economic crisis, the curve will be flat. But with good quality of the people in the labor force, it would be a U-turn or even a V-shape. So this is the contribution of the quality of the people in the labor force. That is one thing, the competency of the people. And another thing is the productivity of the people in the labor force. Productivity defined in terms of when you are, like suppose in a labor intensive industry, in 1 hour you can produce like this amount. Okay, good. Now we turn to something that wouldn't make you feel asleep. Okay. Okay, let me handle that. Thank you. So I put, okay. Okay, let's start. Right. Thank you. So the first demographic dividend that we said is not only the size of the labor force, but also the quality. And here we say, if the workforce is skilled, means very competent, skilled, not unskilled or semi-skilled like in the developing countries, if they are skilled and there are enough jobs, so the economy should absorb the people also, which means the demand and the supply should meet together. So if that is the case, we have skilled workforce, we have adequate jobs, that would be a potential for the workforce to increase income, which means when they have skill, they can work and they can contribute to the company can produce a lot and they earn their income. So when they earn their income, they can have a good life, they can do investment, they can give the money for their children to go to school, or they can even save the money. Or they can also invest in some other kinds of things. which means the money that they earn today are the money that they can use in the future. And this, with a combination of this, stimulate economic growth. So demographic dividend, if you see demographic is demography, dividend is the economic benefit of the population, of the structure of the population. That is it. How if we define, okay, demographic dividend. And we have first demographic dividend, which means when we have a large size of the people in the labor force. There is also another one, second demographic dividend, which would occur when we have a large size of the people, the aging people. So there are two windows of opportunities. The first window, first demographic dividend, doesn't last long. It would be about a decade or two only. And there it is a one window of opportunity only. Because when you see that the curve of the people in the labor force and the dependency ratio means that is only one window. But the second demographic dividend would go on and on forever. This is the difference between two things. When you see the graph, you clearly understand. This is a stylized model of how it becomes a demographic dividend, economic miracle. This first part, here, that this is burden, would be a burden. But when the size of the population in the working age grows up, that is demographic dividend, and it would go to the economic growth to be sustained during that period, like from 1960 to 2010. It varies, but this is some kind of an average from the past years. Japan is in here also. This, another one to let you have a better understanding that the one here, this part, I put a dollar sign in there to tell you that these people in the working age are very important, both for the first demographic dividend and also for the second demographic dividend. The reason is that if they are very competent, the people here are very competent, they are productive, they earn lots of money, and they save their investment, do investment in assets, they would use the money they earn today would be transferred to the future when they turn old. The more they work, the more they earn, the more they save, that would contribute to the second demographic dividend. So the key is now that people today, your generation, has to be competent and productive so that your future, you would enjoy your future when you turn old. This is to tell you that the period of the first demographic dividend varies from country to another. Japan is not in here, but I'll let you see that later on. But you see here that countries, the size, the period of the demographic dividend, the first one varies. Some would have shorter period, others would have long period. Like Poland, only from 19 1989 to 2011. And during this period, the year 2009, 2010, up to 2012 or 2015, there would be still many people, many countries in the world still enjoy the demographic dividend. After that, mostly developing countries would have the demographic dividend. But when we say that the people, the developing countries would still have demographic dividend, you would expect that the economy would be as good as today. Because the developing countries, the people there, the workforce there, are less competent than the people in the developed countries or in Japan. We still have demographic dividend now. So the economy in the future, still we have to work hard to make it better. Without policy intervention, if we would have the economy of the world may be in doom if we don't do something with them. This is to see the second demographic dividend, to have an idea that about wealth per worker, productivity and asset income. If those factors increase, we would have second demographic dividend and it is long lasting. So the higher the proportion of the elderly people, the higher wealth per capita. This is the theory that it may occur if we have a good policy. So this is a key point for the nexus between public sphere and intimate sphere. If the public sphere is not that good, the intimate sphere would be doomed. Because the second demographic dividend is not automatic. It really needs policy intervention. To realize the second dividend, wealth must be accumulated as savings or assets. A precondition. There is a precondition. There must be adequate jobs. Productive workforce in the working age, as I said earlier, because this would lead to potential for workforce to increase income or investment. But if we still rely on the dominating phenomena here in terms of public transfer, family transfer, the economists or the people, the scholars in the spheres of demographic dividend said that this would not ensure a second demographic dividend, but rather make it worse. It says that the second dividend would be reduced if we still keep on relying on the popular policies now. Okay, so we need an alternative policy. Not probably an alternative, but something to add and make the second dividend takes place in future. So the demographic dividend is not automatic. Countries need to act to capitalize on the dividend through appropriate policies. So policy intervention is particularly important, the public sphere. The size and the productivity of the workforce. And the productivity of the workforce depends very much on education, health, the skills, and also female participation. We will go into detail about female participation later on, because to give you a brief idea before we go to that. In aging society, there will be a bigger size of female population. We call it femininization of aging. But the current trend is that female participation declined along with the age. And people who still working are the men. But the men would die before the female. So who will create the second demographic dividend? It's in our hand. The women. Okay. A few days ago, I went to a dinner party with researchers from the COA program. And Mr. Roykoi is from Hungary, and he said that in Hungary, the men would die very young because their wife pushed them to work very hard. And then the wife doesn't have experience in working once her husband died. You would expect the second dividend would be very unlikely in Hungary because the men die very young and the wife doesn't work. This is normal trend in Hungary. Okay, so you, the girls, you must be healthy, eat good, okay, and try to learn a lot. Enjoy your master and PhD courses so that you have good brain to enjoy the second dividend. So when we talk about policy intervention, there are 4 core policies that would contribute to the demographic dividend. First, economic policy. Second, labor policy. Human resource HRD policy, and financial system. These are the 4 core policies. None of them would be more important than another, but the 4 of them should contribute to one another. Now, Asian countries are at the crossroad. What is it? We have like the circumstances for Asian countries are like we have the mature economy and stagnant economy, political disorder, or stable democracy. And where are we at? Thailand, we are in the middle in the second sphere. Our political order is not that bad. We are in the middle to a better one, okay? Compared to Pakistan, the political disorder also the same as in Thailand, but the economy is poorer. Vietnam, South Korea, much better. Going to move to the first sphere already. And then Singapore. This is something to tell you that the 4 core policies that we were talking about in the previous slide should be taken into account if they would like to move from the second sphere to the first sphere. We need the combination of those 4 core policies. Challenges facing Asia, what are they? The current economy, going somewhere, going to higher performance. What is this? A triangle of what? A triangle of the gap. And it is strategic gap to get out of the crisis. Now we are in crisis. But countries are different in terms of to get away from the crisis. And then there is also another gap to be competitive, to be international competitive. The problem is that the first strategic gap below become closer and closer because we adopt similar policy. But the second gap, the second strategic gap, become wider and wider because the quality of the people in the workforce are very much different from country to another. So it becomes wider and wider. Now in Asia, this is to see how it comes to the dividend. The first dividend for Singapore here from this is up to the year 2010. It's closed here. Oh no, this is 2020 or so. It closed here already. So now 2010 it become closing. The demographic dividends first one become closing. Okay, because the people in the labor force age is declining and the dependency ratio is increasing. And here, this would goes to the second dividend, second demographic dividend, which will go on and on and on. Also in others, like in Vietnam, the second dividend, still they are enjoying now. The curve here for the people in the labor force, and then the dependency ratio here. But it becomes narrower and narrower. It means the dividend from the year 2010 will become fading. We call fading demographic dividend. Okay, and then it will close here. And this is the second dividend. But it is not as big as the second dividend we expect from Singapore here. An explanation is the size. Another explanation is the quality. And this is to show you that in Asia, there are different periods of demographic dividend. And we can classify, we can group them together. Some are in the same group. Not that very much vary because we can still put them in group. And these are the second group. Like Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and the Philippines, they are in the same group because they will still have the demographic dividend, which will start fading next year, and then it will end by the year 2047 up there. For the other four, Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, and Myanmar, they will start, the demographic dividend would start fading in the year 2020 and ends in the year around 2030 and 2050. Here you will see that the period of demographic dividend is short, relatively short comparing to the others. Because here, before that, there is still a long way to come. Okay. And then here, Laos PDR. This is East Asia, which includes Japan, China, and Korea. Now you are around here, the red curve here. around 2009, 2010 there, this would tell that the population, like in 1950, the majority of the population are the youngster. This line becomes a youngster. Now, here, the majority of the people are about those in probably age 50 to 64. These are the majority of the people in East Asia now. See, because the curve here would peak around that. Here. And then by the year 2050, the majority of the people are these people from 70s to whatever, 90 or something. This is in East Asia, which is different from Southeast Asia, very much different from Southeast Asia. The major contribution of this are Japan. You will see later on. So the aging society are not only in Asia, but this is the global trend, a major global trend for the 21st century. And if we just doing nothing, the public spheres become inactive, people in the intimate spheres would suffer a lot, because the aging society would put pressure on the economy, on the society, and also on the politics. Political disorder may be expected. And from now on, the people will become aging faster and faster than the old days. Here, if we compare those in the aging societies, we have developed countries, less developed countries, and the least one, the very, very, very less developed countries here. Okay? Looking at here, the world, the overall world here, now we have about this size of people, age 60s and above, and here it would increase a lot. You see? From 600 something to almost 2,000. Okay? Comparing to the percentage doubled. Okay? But if you take a look only on these columns first, the more developed countries, we have would have less or elderly people than the developing countries. But this is tricky. You have to take a look at the second column here, because the developing countries, the size is very large. So when we take a look at the percentage, here you will see that the aging societies are more in the developed countries than in the developing countries, and less for this. Okay? And then, here, you see, the people in the aging society would be more men than women. But beyond that, I will show you a graph. The size of the female aging would be very big. Now, if you compare among parts of the world, you will see that the overall world by the year 2000 and 2025, this is to look at the medium term, okay? The percentage of the elderly are more in the non-Asian developed countries. So means in the US, the EU, and things like it, and those countries developed one, while Asia is much below, about half or so, okay, comparing to Africa and Latin America. And even up to the year 2025, the population, the aging population has increased from about 260 million to almost 500 million. Please take a look that here there are more aging people than Asia. See? Okay? But Asia is very varied. Asia includes both developed and developing and less developing countries. The quality of the Asian people varied a lot. McKinsey in the next slide, following slide, will tell that the growth pole would change from developed countries to Asia in the future. But I do doubt that if we take the concept of second demographic dividend into consideration. Because the people in the labor force, in the aging society in the EU, their participation, aging participation in the labor force is much more than in Asia. So I do doubt that the Asian miracles will be on, and the growth pole of economic growth would still be in Asia or in European countries. Here, Japan, among the aging societies, Japan ranks #1 in the world, equivalent to Italy. While the US is still 12.2, others are all European countries. And this to lead you a closer look of how the intimate sphere and the public sphere are much more need to be connected to one another in order to have a better demographic dividend, in order to capitalize demographic dividend. Here they use the term by Galini, they use the term macro level, which is the public sphere, and up there the micro means the intimate sphere. The policies need to tackle both the intimate sphere over there and to the public sphere here. See the aging population, and we have to do the public sphere. The policies must be doing something with the labor force, with women of reproductive means in the while they still can have children, the elderly, the subnational administrative units. Okay, so that it would lead to here. The policies, other policies would be, these to be the key policies rather than the 4 core policies. The 4 core policies are for a particular nation. But here, you should have foreign affairs, international relations, also to include. Because we are in the world that something happened here in one country would affect another countries in the world. If this country is very poor, the people are very unskilled, there is no job to go. This is not, we are in a better world, a better country here. We cannot ignore them because that would affect us anyway. Okay, so the policy has to be much more than just the 4 core policies, but those 4 core policies are really the core, cannot be ignored. Any questions so far? So I'll go a bit further to the impact of the aging society. This is what Bloom and Mason, Andrew Mason, wrote about demographic dividend and the impact of aging societies about 3 or 4 years before now. They said the population aging is expected to result in an aging workforce and a significant slowdown in the growth of the people in the working age. It can also have fundamental impacts on the proportion of the people, the working age, and the dependent population. Dependents mean the youngster and the elderly, okay? Since the participation rate of the elderly population is much lower than those in the prime age labor force. Prime age means about 15 to 20s or 30 something. Okay. Their participation rate in the labor force is much lower than the those in the prime age of the labor force. Aging of the workforce will reduce the total aggregate labor force participation rate. This is what they said. And also, stagnant growth of the working age population together combined with declining aggregate labor force participation rate, if these 2 factors combine together, there will be a lot of pressure on the labor supply. And suppose there are more and more decline in fertility rate, the labor supply would be contracted very short. So if we have to look into the future, looking towards the future, the growth rate of the aging population in developing countries like in Asia will accelerate, while some will be even faster and reach a higher rate than those in developed countries. If you still remember the slide that showed that Japan has about 19.5% of people in the aging, and European countries would be around 15 or something. Developing countries in Asia, some of them would catch that. Therefore, some developing countries in Asia will be demographically advanced, but economically not yet advanced. To some extent, this will bring burden in terms of economic burden, social burden, and political burden on the society. And this would impede the economic growth. It would harm social cohesion. Harmony in the society would be harmed, and the political stability would also be harmed if we don't have an appropriate policy intervention from the public sphere. As a result, countries in Asia represent a mosaic characterized by a high degree of diversity in economic growth and social progress. And rapid aging in Asia will also be accompanied by other transitions: economic transition, social transition, political transition, and also technological transition. Hence, population aging in Asia may raise fundamental questions, a lot of them. When we come to an aging society in Asia, many things come to the mind of the people. And these are key questions that people have in their mind. One, when we turn old, do we still have to work? Like in the first question, how do the elderly population remain independent and active economically, and therefore reduce the burden of the younger population? The elderly people, many of them, rather than think that, do I still have to work? They also think that I myself have my own dignity. I don't want to be burdened to my children. Like my father, he's almost 80. He walks very slowly because of aging. But once I would like to go to help him, to carry him, oh no, he said, no. Let me walk slowly, but sure, I don't fall. So they don't want to be burdened to their children or their grandchildren. My children, my son and daughter, would like to go and help his grandfather to walk from here to there. We went shopping together, and my grandfather said, you go ahead, I'll walk along, but slowly. Finally, I will reach you anyway. So they don't want to be burdened, the elderly people. Your grandparents would probably have this kind of mentality. They don't want to be burdened because they feel that their dignity is very important. They would feel very stressful if they think that they become burden to their children. So, the many people in the aging ages, they still would like to earn some money. And some did even better than those in the working age like me. Like now, I am a professor in a university and can earn a lot of money to enjoy a peaceful life. But my father, he said, that is not your money here now, cannot ensure your future. So I, as your father, my father said, I have to earn a lot of money, much more than you, 5 times than you earn, so that my money will still be used, you can still use my money when I die already. This is what my father said. So this is the concept of the second dividend. It's not from outer world, but it is already in the minds of the people, the elderly people already. And my father, he succeeded in earning money 5 times more than me now. He still have to give me money sometimes. So this is something that really takes place even in Thailand, which is still a developing country. But the mentality of the people, the elderly people, are everywhere. So don't create the mentality that they are burdensome. Create the mentality that we have to maximize their dignity. They have to be proud of themselves. Let's check that. Okay. Other questions like, will the rapid increase of the percentage numbers of the elderly would bankrupt the healthcare services and social security systems. Because they would say, like in many countries, the government is trying to cut the budget for the elderly support already, because they would worry that there would be a bankrupt in care services. Another question would be, how will change in norms and on family affect the financing of the elderly population? This you will see in the later slide in the handout. The case of Singapore is provided in terms of coexistence. The trends of the family will change. If you have the time to go in that you would have a closer look on this question. Another question, how will political factors affect policies in financing the elderly population? This is particularly the case for the developing countries with political disorder or political instability. Because like in Thailand, we have, so far in 5 years, we have 3 prime ministers in 5 years. Comparing to Singapore, in 2 decades, they have 1 prime minister, Okay, because in developing countries, the politics is very unstable. And these affect the financial system, the budget. So in Thailand, for example, they don't think far. They only think once they come into the office as a government, they would think only within 1 year. If they survive to another year, they would think just another year ahead. So long-term thinking would be a case in developing countries. If there are highly political disorder there. Here are the issues of concern. Many of them. But among them, these are the key issues of concern. Financing aging societies. I put this in first priority because when we think about aging society, people would think, how should we finance them? How should we help them? This is from the concept that they are burdensome. Okay. The second concern, issue of concern, policies toward aging society. What kind of policy should be? Should it be different from now? Pension, healthcare management and finance, successful and active aging. How do we help them to be active aging? Do we need a certain kind of training, particular training for them? Because they may not be able to attend training classes like the youngsters, but they need some kind of special class for them in order to be active aging. Migration. The nexus between migration, civil society, and aging. Feminization of aging. This means that the majority of the aging people are female. Okay. The preconditions for a successful and active aging society. I put this in red because this is the key priority that we now in this generation too need to highlight, need to have a good policy. The projected world population, feminization of aging. You see that it would increase from 50 to 50 to 54 to 46, and then 63 and 37 by the age 80 and above. Okay, so the notion of feminization of aging, it says that although women make up half of world population, by the end of the next quarter century, they will account for more than half, 54% of people aged 60 and older, and 63% of very old people, 80 and older. This is what the UN, United Nations, says in the World Population Prospects in the year 2004, 5 years before now. This is what they projected. See, and this contrasts with this one, the larger size, larger and larger size of female in the aging society, but their participation rate declining and declining and declining everywhere. This is to lead to the key point that we need really an effective and appropriate policies in the public sphere. In Asia, the rate curve, that is the average, but if we separate them in Central and South and Central Asia and East Asia, the term East Asia here is not just Japan, China, and Korea, but include ASEAN as well. Because lately, the ASEAN plus 3 are termed as East Asia. So, the difference between East Asia and South and Central Asia. Central Asia is the Middle East. Okay. In the black market. The East Asia, the participation rate was very high. That's why the East Asia was Asian miracle. Okay, but then when the people grows old, it will drop from the age 50 and more and more and more. So when they retire, it become very low. Many of them don't work. Retirement, really retirement for them. Okay. So the policy that we need is to turn this up for participation rate. This is for female participation. We have to encourage them to participate in the labor market when they turn old. Now we come notes on future trend. This is what I said that I disagree with McKinsey. This is what McKinsey said, that the centers of economic activity will shift profoundly, not only globally, but regionally. Shift within region will be even more dramatic. And today, Asia, excluding Japan, accounts for 30% of the world's GDP, while Western Europe accounts for more than 30%. This is today, but in 20 years' time. McKinsey expects Asia to contribute to the world's GDP much more than European countries. This is what I said that I totally disagree. McKinsey said this in the year 2006, which is the year that the concept of second demographic dividend was launched in China. Here, from now on, there will be a comparison between Asia and Europe. Okay? The curve here, the size of the people, the youth. You see, both the youth and the elderly, they are comparable. The trend is quite comparable between Asia and European countries, particularly the elderly. Only that the size is bigger in the European countries than in Asia, but the trend is very comparable. So there is not much disparities among both regions. And Asia here means the whole Asia. Okay, East Asia, South Asia, Central Asia. And also the dependency ratio, see, it's also like following the same trend. In European countries, like in Asia, the proportion of the female, the elderly female here, is very go that far to about this is about 14 or something, 14%. Okay. This is in the year 2010, next year. And let's see, 20 years from then. More and more. So, if we take a look at the developing Asia, only which we still keep Japan apart because Japan has better policies and they have learned about the demographic dividend earlier than the developing Asia, which is ASEAN. Okay, because in ASEAN, demographic dividend is a new issue there. Not only to the region, but also to the ASEAN member countries. You know that ASEAN is planning towards an ASEAN community by the year 2015. Have you heard about that? ASEAN community. When the riots 2 weeks ago, we supposed to have an ASEAN summit, which we would design blueprint for ASEAN community. But then we still don't have the blueprint yet because the ASEAN summit was over by the Rachel's riot. But anyway, Southeast Asia, which comprises 10 countries, you know 10 countries of ASEAN, right? They are, who they are? Can you tell me the member countries of ASEAN? You don't? Thailand is one. So we Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Brunei Darussalam, what else? I have to do it from alphabetically like this. First is Brunei Darussalam, the B, right? And then Cambodia. And then Indonesia, Laos, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar. Are they 10 yet? You see that when we take a look at these 10 countries, the economic development varies a lot. The ADB said that the ASEAN countries can be classified into 3 groups. Within one community, we have 3 groups. The competitive one, the higher end of the ASEAN countries are Singapore. Okay, Singapore has a vision to become highly developed countries, a highly developed country by the year 2020. Okay. The second group, there are Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia. We call these middle-income ASEAN countries. And they are trying to reposition themselves to the first end, like Singapore. Okay, and the below one, those in the lower end of the low-income countries are, what are they? Cambodia, and then Vietnam, and then Laos, yes, Myanmar, right? Okay, but Vietnam is doing, they has developed so fast, they would become in the second sphere, in the second part of the middle income countries very soon. Okay, because of what? Because of the quality of the people in Vietnam. Okay. When I went to Vietnam 10 years ago, I was at the Institute of Asian Studies at Chulalongkorn University. Being there, I have been visited a lot by Vietnamese scholars. Like in the year 2000, many of them come from think tanks of Vietnam. They come to see me and discuss many things. Back then, they hardly speak English. They talk with a Vietnamese accent, and they really couldn't communicate. A year back, the same group of people came to see me again. Their English improved a lot. And I asked them, did you have an English class back home? Or it is mandatory by the government for you to take English class? They said no. They studied English on their own in the evening. Okay, and 5 years ago, I went to give lectures, not really lectures, but to give seminars. It was an invitation by the U.S. Department of Labor, invited me to give lectures in Vietnam. By then, when I went there, I was so very surprised. The students, the undergraduate, came to talk to me, and their English was very, very good. The English class was not offered regularly in Vietnam, but most of them told me that they learned by themselves. They can communicate very good in English. And last year, many of them come to Japan, got a PhD, Monbusho fellowships, and many other places for PhD programs with good English and good Japanese too. So you see that they are really trying to human capitalizing themselves on their own. This is the mentality that we need more and more in Asian countries. I don't know if we have Vietnamese students in Kyoto University. Sometimes when you talk to them, non-Japanese like me wouldn't able to tell if they are Japanese or Vietnamese because they try to have a really Japanese accent, and they wouldn't let any people to catch that they are non-Japanese. They would like to work. And this is a good thing for Vietnam, that they let people come, but they don't urge them to return home, because they would return home anyway. They are not forced, but they would return home anyway with human capital to upgrade Vietnam. So Vietnam, people in Thailand said, wow, Thailand is this, we would be far behind Vietnam in future times. I think that is true. Because the people in Thailand, they don't like to human capitalizing themselves that much. They enjoy easy life. Many of them are postmodernism. They go to games, they don't want to go to school, or even go to school to get a bachelor degree, just a piece of paper that they want to get into the labor market. So just a piece of paper doesn't go to the head. So this is something that in future times, the growth center in Asia would diversify to only those countries with human capital only. And I wonder if Thailand would be there. I'm afraid not. I really do. Okay. And before we go to this is going to be the end of this first session here, that the pace and degree of economic benefits that could be attained would vary across the ASEAN region. And part of the explanation of the variation in ASEAN is the differing policy environment among ASEAN member countries. They have contributed to variations in the levels of skills and competency of the productive workforce in this open economy. ASEAN was founded 40 years ago in 1967, but we didn't communicate that much in terms of policy, because we have the so-called principles of non-interference in policy. So we don't communicate, we don't consult in terms of policy, not like in European countries. So that's why it's more competition than cooperation among ASEAN member countries so far. Okay, and this would explain why we have variations in levels of skills and competency, because each country have their own policy, and they try not to tell others what we are doing so that they don't imitate. If they know what we are doing, they may be doing better than us, something like that. So this is something that they don't really have a very good idea of cooperation. And they don't have a very good idea that if something happens here, it may affect one another. Okay. So may I stop the first session here so that we would come to and now it comes to the key challenge for ASEAN. So the problem of ASEAN is they are trying to reposition themselves in terms of the international competitiveness. Like I said earlier, that Thailand is trying to reposition from the middle income country to higher income countries like in Singapore. Okay? And then the problem is that in order to be international competitive, the key factors is the quality of the people. This is a key factor for ASEAN people, because this is some kind of a joke. Like, for example, Thailand. They say, oh, Thailand, you have lots of good things. You have good food, you have good geography, good atmosphere, the weather is nice, it's not very cold. You have good rice, you have good rivers for people to enjoy living. But then Thailand still cannot go to reach the international competitiveness. And they said, why, you know? It's because we have the Thai people. So they said, God give us everything. And they said, oh, we give too much to Thailand already, so God gives the Thai people to Thailand. This is something that is very joke that the people say, oh. But anyway, it tells that the human resources are the key. We do have good people, the talented people in Thailand, but only small size. We always say that the talented people in Thailand are the minority. So it's different from here, right? But anyway, here, now, from here we will compare with EU. That what we hear is that the regional issues are more or less similar between EU and Asia or ASEAN, right? Not only the structure of the population that are comparable, the youth and the elderly that goes along the same trend, but also the issues of concern are also more or less similar. What are the priorities of the European Union? Human resources is a key factor that the European countries, the European Commission give priorities to. And whatever policies that they are dealing with, they have the so-called demography as a basis when they consider policies. So when they talk about aging, labor force mobility, unemployment, migration, health, education, and pension reform, these policies are what are the highlights. And these kind of policies became highlighted because the demographic factors are put into consideration of the policymakers, which is different from here. I mean, from Southeast Asia. They usually decide a policy from their own perspective. Like when they decide an economic policy, they would think only in terms of economists, not interdisciplinary between economists and demography. But in European countries, they always rely on interdisciplinary when they decide a policy, not just single discipline to decide a policy. Some issues are those issues would be more acute when the EU is enlarged, because this would be more aging, the problem of unemployment, the problem of the of migration or the health and education. Problems. You know that EU, but once you become a citizen of EU, you can go everywhere. It's a free flow of people there in the EU, right? Because you can go from one country to another. Okay, you don't need a visa from to travel from Germany to Denmark. To the Netherlands or things like that. You don't need that, and you can also get a job. I have lots of friends who is he's from the UK, and now she's working as a director of a department in Austria, in Innsbruck. So this is something that can happen. It's the policy of the EU to encourage people to work from one country to another. But the problem is that in practice, not many of them move from one country to another. Many of them still remain in their own country. Those who move from one country to another are from non-EU countries. So now the EU has tried to launch a new policy to encourage more mobility of the people. Because once they move from one country to another, it means that the human capital is moving also. And they can share, they can learn, and that is good for the economy. So the workers, businessmen, and self-employed can be transferred from one country to another. This is something that the policy has provided already. The public sphere provided this kind of policy, but intimate sphere remain not to adopt this kind of policy. Still, many of them still remain in their own countries. EU still close the borders for non-EU people to come to work. But they come to work a lot anyway. So they become as irregular immigrants. And the EU said this is a serious concern, particularly to the South Europe members. This is particularly, they come here a lot. The weather is nice there, right? Rather than the upper north. But the upper north is also, you can find many people like from Thailand, from Myanmar, from Cambodia, in the upper part of European countries. The flux of migrants toward the EU increased during the last years because this is the policy effect. Because the developed countries did not apply policies which could bring development locally in the developing countries, and that's the need for migration from those countries could be diminished. This is something like, as I said earlier, let's suppose there are two countries. One is very advanced economy, another is very poor economy. Many countries around the world are carrying their own policies for their own country only. But if they don't lend their hand from the better world here, better economy here, to the poor country here, people from the poor country will see, wow, I don't get a job. This is the poor country. Well, I don't have a job. I don't have a good living. So I better come here to have a good living, to get a job. Because people in this better world here. There are lots of jobs for me to enjoy, so they come. But if the policies here extend in terms of foreign policy to lend a hand to this one, okay, people here would still be here. They can decide whether they can enjoy the economy, they can enjoy the work in their own country, or they would like to go there to another country. Like in the European countries, many of them, if you go there, you will see lots of black people, lots of Asian people from developing or the least developed countries to go to European countries. Because the countries here in the developing countries, they didn't have anyone to lend their hand. So they have to find their own way in order to survive. So the public sphere that we are talking about in this program is not only a public sphere within one particular nation, but the public sphere that should be connected with among nations as well. So, as I said earlier, that Asia is very diverse in terms of economic development. So the connection between public spheres from one country to another is particularly important for Asia and the future of Asia. If we would like to have the Asian miracles to be sustained in the future times. Okay. And for the irregular migration, what they are trying to do now is to use the technology in terms of the machine-readable travel documents. You see the e-passports, things like that, or the scan, that biotechnology, and also the cooperation between governments to arrange a return movement. But this is something that they were trying to do. But anyway, a more serious problem for the EU is the aging society, as we all know already, right? That they are become aging more and more and faster. What the EU now is trying to do is that the Commission has approved a policy or directives trying to mobilize the people at all ages to full potentiality, right? They said there's going to be some kind of a win-win strategy and no exclusion. So what they are trying to do is in terms of lifelong learning, working longer, retiring later than they used to, and also the practice of health-sustaining activities. This is what they are trying to do. And if you see here that when we talk about lifelong learning, the concept here is from cradle to grave. Okay? In Asia, in many parts of Asia, like Southeast Asia, lifelong learning means non-formal education. Or once you go get into the job, and then you have something like you have to train and retrain in order to get into the job or to get a new job. But the concept of lifelong learning in the EU is very much different. It is from cradle to grave. This is the key term that they use, from cradle to grave. So it's everybody in the society, no exclusion. And also working longer. When you see that if you go to the EU or even to the United States, retirement is some kind of, oh no, don't say that. Retirement is prohibited to be called, are you retired? You say, are you retired? This, oh no, watch your language, they will say. Watch your language. We don't like the word retired because we don't retire. This is a concept that they still keep on working and working and working. So the human capital would be go on and on and on. Why is that so? Because if you stop working, it means that parts of your brain would be destroyed, right? But if you keep on working, the growth hormone will keep on producing, and the brain will keep on working. So the human capital will not be fading. But if you stop working, you become burdened. You don't earn money. Your brain is damaging. You damage your own brain if you don't work, right? So this is something that lifelong learning and working longer, and health activities. You see, if you go to the EU, they are very conscious in terms of recycling materials, and to try to have a good health system, because that affects the brains also, affect the blood circulation and everything. So we talked about HRD last time. So HRD is what? Education, training, and health. So okay, this is the HRD. Lifelong learning, education, and training here. Not only education, formal education, but also informal and non-formal education. And non-formal education is training, like workplace learning. Okay. No retirement or retire later, and then good health. And with this in mind, the policy response in Europe are thinking about if they would have in the financial system would be okay to take care of to make people become healthy. This is something also, not only, so this is HRD, lifelong learning, okay, education and training, and then health also, right? So, and good health need financial system, appropriate financial system. Full employment is a key policy in European countries. They need full employment. When we are here in Asia, people always talk about unemployment. And now lately, underemployment also is a problem in Asia. What is unemployment, you know? Can you tell what is unemployment? And underemployment? Unemployment that you don't work, right? You are not employed. But underemployment means that you are in the labor market, you work, but you work less than what you should be able to work. Like you work less hours. Suppose you get a bachelor degree or a master degree, and you get into the work, and they pay you as a salary for those from undergraduate or below that. This is underemployment. This is a problem in Asia. Also in European countries, in the EU, but they try to solve it, and they put in a policy for full employment. There must be a policy many countries should do. They know that full employment is the key for a demographic dividend, but they don't put into policy. Because full employment is not automatic. They need a policy and measures to lead to full employment. Okay? And this is what they say. The EU considers it necessary to achieve activity rates for all groups in the working age population, which are as high as possible. The activity patterns of the older generation and migrants have to be taken into account. So full employment is not only for the EU people, but also for the migrant workers also. And the elderly. You see the participation rate of the elderly in the EU is declining, right? Particularly the female. They said, no, they should increase. The participation rate for the elderly should increase. So they put here all groups, working age and also the older generation. The employment scenario was okay during the year, but when they take a closer look of the employment scenario, they found that there are unused labor capacity, particularly for the female categories, age 30 to 49. Unused labor capacity. So they try to bring them up to full-time and part-time. Part-time would be like underemployment also. Now, those issues that I raised for the EU are more or less like in Asia, particularly developing Asian countries like ASEAN. Okay. One thing is that should we do the same as the EU? Or can we do like that? Can we learn from them? We cannot adopt whatever takes place in the EU to our own sphere because things are different. And the way, the structure, the bureaucracy in the EU are much different from Asia. The institutional difference are the key point that, oh, wait a minute, let's not think that we should take whatever the policies they take and adopt them to Asia. No, they said. So, because, and another thing is that the issues and the priorities, the emphasis of the issue and the priorities are different between ASEAN and EU. Okay? This is to tell you an example of the priority of concern. The EU care more in terms of the unemployment and irregular migration from outside the region. But for ASEAN, the key concern, if we would like to maximize the demographic dividend, the key concern for us is the quality of the human resources to make it more productive. So it's the policy, the role of the public sphere and in EU and ASEAN are different because the priority should be different. Okay. The trend here. Okay. The recent trend now we see if we talk about human development in developing Asia, which is ASEAN, the gap of human development now is narrower than the past decades. Human development is in terms of education, in terms of health care, and others that affect people to have a good life. The gap becomes narrow now, but it's not that narrow enough. And part of the improvement in the human development is the effort of a particular country, complemented by the ASEAN, the regional policies to help. Okay? But even that, we are not sure if we can survive in future times. Like now, we have economic crisis. The human development that even narrow and not narrow, people still suffer a lot. And we don't have a so-called good practice. We don't know what is good practice. We don't even know what is best practice to help people. Okay. Problems is that the institutional factors in developing Asia, like ASEAN, is the problem. So it's the mechanism or the institutional mechanism are the weakness. One thing is that they think they are poor, they are developing, and they don't have money. So whatever they want to do, the regional projects, they would have to rely on sources from outside. And so it's not, they cannot be sure if they would get the sources on a sustainable basis. This year they may get, another year they may not. And when ASEAN was founded 40 years ago, the first 2 decades of ASEAN, the UN, World Bank, many institutions of lending agencies give money to ASEAN to have good regional projects a lot. But that lasts only, one project would last no more than 1 decade, last no more than 10 years. And then they will have to get for more and more funds in order to have a regional project. So once there are projects that come, they have to make sure that the project is not, there is no one else behind that project. And it's like now in ASEAN, they know that we need lots of money, and Australia would like to have a close collaboration with ASEAN a lot. But the ASEAN, they kind of reserve themselves when they communicate with Australia, comparing with EU or Japan. They kind of reserve comparing to Australia. But Australia think that if they are still kept away from ASEAN, which they think that ASEAN would be a center of growth in the future times, so they have to come and play a level playing field in ASEAN first. So the contact with the ASEAN Secretariat that we have money. If ASEAN want to do something in terms of a study, feasibility of anything for FTA or everything, they can ask for money from Australian fund. But they have to give information and everything of data to Australia to see if the project is feasible to study or not. So the Australia, they know everything about ASEAN member countries, but we in ASEAN member countries, we don't know even one another, and we don't even know what Australia is doing. So this means that someone behind the fund. And lately, East Asia, like Japan, China, and Korea, South Korea has become partners in this process. Okay, and it covers many things like labor, social welfare, rural development, everything. Okay, and we, like the developing Asians, they are they are spoiled. So they depend on others too much, so they are not have their own ways of thinking, how they can stand on their own. So they become spoiled. Well, they will give us money anyway. So let's get also money and technical transfer from them. We don't have to waste our brain to think. This is the way the European Asia think, which is, if you think in terms of demographic dividend, this is wrong, right? Because demographic dividend, we have to stand on our own feet to be strong and lend hand to others, right? The second problem, in terms of institutional problem in developing Asia, is that we're trying to help one another. Like Thailand is trying to help lend hand to Laos PDR, to Cambodia, or Singapore is trying to lend a hand to Vietnam, or to Thailand or Indonesia. But that is only in ad hoc nature and short-term basis. 5 years or so a project, and only ad hoc. So this is a problem. And cooperation would be more in terms of short-term training, observation, and technical assistance, more than know-how and technology transfer. And third one is that ASEAN itself is not a unified sphere of regionalism yet. We have been, I said earlier, ASEAN was founded 40 years ago in 1967. We should be more like cohesion among one another, cooperation to be strong. But in fact, we compete among ourselves rather than to cooperate among ourselves. It's not really a unified sphere. Okay? And they do in whatever they want to do, so it's not come in one cohesion or one harmonization. Harmonization is no way in ASEAN. And this explains why it is so. The characteristics of ASEAN or developing Asia. So when we talk about ASEAN, is what is ASEAN really? So ASEAN is complex and fragmented and utility maximizing. Whatever they want to do, try to maximize their own utility. Okay. And there are different levels, a big gap of economic development, the socio-economic background, and national interests so varied, so very much different. Okay, and then they said their sovereignty is always enshrined. Okay, they keep this above everything, sovereignty, and increased exposure of the local economy to opportunities and threats to the new economy and global change, inadequate institutional mechanism and legislative frameworks to many things that we should do this and that, but we don't have a good law to make that happen. Even we have the law, we don't have institutional mechanism to carry out the laws. This is a key problem in that part of the world. Okay, and there is shortcomings in terms of the balance between national and regional interests. So once they think that sovereignty is above everything, so the national interest is above regional interest, right? Okay, but to have a good demographic dividend, regional interest should be prioritized rather than national interest. Okay. Now let's come to a case study of Singapore. Remember that I said Singapore is an advanced economy comparing with other, among the 10 ASEAN member countries. And Singapore has become aging society. Okay. So they have prepared themselves in terms of trying to have a good policy to deal with the aging society, because they know this long time ago. This was presented by Angelique Chan in 2003. This was in 2003, which is ways back. But this to show that Singapore was thinking about this even when it was then already. Okay, so this to tell you that Singapore is kind of well prepared. But even that kind of well prepared, we still don't know if Singapore would come as a good practice or best practice yet. Because there are problems also that they cannot succeed. They know that their labor force age is declining, and they're trying to encourage people to get married, right? They have a love boat, encourage people to go to love boat and to find a friend to get married. This is the policy. But in practice, they don't get married. The Singapore girls would like to be single. So they cannot increase their fertility rate. So they have the policy. Singapore is a good case of the public sphere and intimate sphere that don't connect to one another. Singapore has good policy, but the people don't follow the policy. Singapore has good human capital, but they still have to rely on. But it's not enough because Singapore, the size of Singapore is very small. So the human capital in Singapore is not sufficient for Singapore to sustain their economic growth. Okay? Singapore population is aging rapidly. It would be about 19% by the year 2030. The previous slide I showed you, Japan is what, 19.5%? Yeah, right? Remember the graph that you came to ask me?
I'm following this.
Yeah, the graph that in here. This one on page 4. Page 4. Japan is 19.5%. Okay, Italy is also 19.5%. And in the year 2030, Singapore would catch Japan because it would have 30% of the population who become aging. Okay? And the old age dependency ratio is different from dependency ratio. Okay? Dependency ratio is the youngsters, the young population, and the elderly. But old age dependency is just for the old age, the elderly. And this old age of the elderly will increase from this to this. Okay? So they said they need appropriate policies before the demographic window closes. If you take a look at the previous slide that shows the demographic dividend in Singapore, the slides on page 3, right? Page 3, this one. Okay. The demographic window in Singapore would be ended by around 2040. So you would expect that by 2040, the aging population would be more than 19% of the population, right? So they said they would have to do something. They should have an appropriate public sphere by then. Okay. What has Singapore done? Singapore has been well prepared. Long time before they would realize, before the demographic dividend would be over. See, it is in the year 1982. Okay, they are aware that Singapore would have a problem of aging society if they don't do anything. So Singapore is a good example of a country that has been well prepared for the future. Okay. Singapore, now, the year 2010, right, that Singapore becomes aging society, but they have a policy already in 1982. And then they have a committee to address problems. You will see that the problems identified here are the key problems that I showed in earlier slides. And also the problems, many problems are shared in the EU also. Remember, right? Various policy recommendations, among them is Central Provident Fund for the older people, the tax and everything in order to think about that. So this kind of thing that they had launched in the old days, but now the people from the second demographic dividend perspective said, wait a minute, if this is good enough already, or we need another kind of policy. One thing that they would like to do is to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. So you see that this is still behind the European people, behind the policies in the EU, that retirement is a no-no. Don't talk about retirement in the EU. Okay, but in Singapore, still retirement, and only 62, which is too early. Okay, too early. That should be beyond that. Financial security is the key concern for Singapore, the Central Provident Fund, and then the policy, there is a gap between the policy that has been launched and the people who receive the benefit from the policies, because in practice, there are still people who are without the savings or little from the Central Provident Fund. Okay, not from the public, but they rely on the on the family support. This is particularly the Indian people. So now, because of the gap between the public sphere and the intimate sphere, the family in Singapore has become under stress. The Singapore government has realized this problem, and they try to mitigate the problem by trying to help families. If they take care of the elderly at home, they would have some kind of support. And then there is also a problem because the policies to encourage people to get married doesn't work. And this has a problem if that would affect the elderly people as well. Another problem that Singapore that is trying to do is to encourage the elderly people to remain in the labor market. There has been trying to do many things like retraining, try to educate the employers and employees, try to provide information in terms of job placement and everything. They were trying to do everything, but still the elderly people, they hesitate to return to the labor market. They said, well, why should I do that? Because I can enjoy my peaceful life with the children or with my own children and grandchildren, or I can be I can enjoy facilities that are provided by the government, the welfare by the government. Why should I go to work? And if I go to work, I don't know what to do because now they're using computers. They're using internet. I don't know how to use computers. This is what they say. So that would lead to another problem. If we would like to retrain them, we would need a special kind of training classes that fit the elderly people to encourage them to come to work. Once they get difficult to go to work, or to understand what is the real world of working, they would hesitate. But this is something that has been taking place in an advanced economy, because an advanced economy with good welfare support from the public fund, people just remain inactive once they become old, because they can still rely on the welfare anyway. But this episode is quite different from developing countries. You would see, if you go to Thailand, you would go to Laos, PDR, or Cambodia, people there still would like to learn, to be educated. Before I came here, there was a TV, a program on the TV show an elderly woman. She's 80. A problem in Thailand is that most of the people at the age of 80 in the rural area, they have no education. But then they said, I want to make money, but I don't understand the law. So I should study. So they go to school, ask permission from the school to admit her to go to school and sit with the children, trying to learn how to write, to understand Thai. This is not only one case, but you can find a lot of them. So the elderly in the developing countries, eager to learn so that they can catch up with the world. If you go to Laos PDR, there is training classes provided by the community. The facilities for training is not this good. It's like a shelter with candles, candlelight. So it's hard, there is no electricity in the rural area in Laos PDR. And there is one teacher to go to training. There, you would imagine, the shelter is full of the people in order that they can learn and learn and learn. It's not mandatory. It's provided. It's for free, but they come to learn on their own initiative. Here in Japan, I was told by my students who came here in the first workshop that when Professor Oshai organized a seminar, they said they were surprised that people who come to attend the seminars, they say lots of gray hairs. So the Japanese people, the Japanese elderly people are eager to learn also. I wish this is the case in Singapore. The welfare in Singapore is very strong. The problem may be even worse if you go to Brunei Darussalam, because the welfare there is very strong. So we wonder if we would say the Asian miracles would be sustained in Asia, Southeast Asia, which is developing. I'm not sure if where is Brunei Darussalam, because the people there, they can get education free of charge, free education up to a university level, and then no more. No training, because they say they don't have to, they enjoy welfare from the government. Singapore co-residence is a key policy for Singapore. And Singapore has the highest co-residence rate in Asia. It is a government policy to try to encourage co-residence. But also it is some kind of a moral obligation. This is Asian culture, right? Moral obligations of adult children to take care of their elderly parents. This is an obligation. But that is not enough. So the Singapore said there should be some kind of incentive for them to take good care of their parents. the aging parents. So they provide some kind of financial support for them to take care of their parents to living with them. Okay. The idea of the co-residence is to promote well-being, the elderly people to be well-being. Okay, and then some kind of tax incentives. The focus is to create more housing options for older adults, because the elderly, if they can have an option, they would rather prefer to stay with their adult children than to be in a public house that provide for the elderly, right? So this is the mentality. So this is the connection between the public sphere and the intimate sphere. That if you would like to do something that is effective for the intimate sphere, people in the intimate sphere to follow the policy, you have to do something that has already existed and maximize that further. But if you do something that is against their own will, that wouldn't be possible. So you see the policy of co-residence, you compare the co-residence policy and the love boat policy. The policy to encourage girls to get married, which is not effective, right? But this policy, co-residence policy, is effective. Because the people, the receivers of the policies, they are receptive to this kind of things already. So the policy is that aging in place. This is the slogan, aging in place. Something that is inherited in the culture, the Asian culture, in terms of moral obligation. So it's good. This is a win-win situation, right? So far, because the elderly would be able to enjoy living with their adult children, okay? And the adult children think that, well, they can do good. This is some kind of a merit. They do good to the elderly, their parents, right? So some kind of a win-win situation. But when we compare this with other Asian countries, the incidence of co-residence are declining. Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. But if you compare with the European countries, okay, the UK, this is not that the declining rate is not that serious comparing to Asian countries. Another thing that is a key concern, and Singapore is trying to do, is to bring in talented people from outside. But there's still the response of the local population is still mixed. Some are receptive, some are said, oh no, they are trying to get away our job. Okay, the policy of Singapore is like this. It's very attractive to the talented people from around the world. Once they realize that you are human capital, and you go there in Singapore, they encourage you to become citizen. So you can have 2 homes. Like lots of my friends from the States, they are professors from the States, and they end up being professors in Singapore. They said they earn more, and they enjoy residential citizenship in Singapore. Okay, so human capital in Singapore is the key concern. They have small population. Their population are also human capital, but that is not enough for Singapore to sustain their growth, their competitiveness. So they have to import human capital from outside with incentives. Okay, not only money, but also citizenship. So there is no discrimination. It's more when they come to human capital would get national treatment in Singapore. Okay, and if you work in Singapore, this is I'm kind of getting jealous of the Singaporean people. Like if you are a professor or you are an academic or researcher, and you get some kind of financial support for research, this amount of money, and the government, oh, you get this one. I'll give you 3 more times of that, so that you would do, your research would be excellent. So this kind of human capital become more and more stronger and stronger, and these kind of incentives bring in more talented people, foreign talents in Singapore. So they don't have to, because to invest in a human capital, you have to invest a lot, right? But they don't have to do anything. They don't have to invest anything. They just provide incentives and they get the human capital flying far away to stay in Singapore. And they earn a lot. So if you don't have enough labor force, you can bring in. But the key is to be selective. Just a good one. So far that we have been from last lecture up to now is to show you that demographic dividend is not automatic. Particularly for the second dividend, the key concern is to have an appropriate policies and institutional support. A good policies, good institutional mechanism. This is more difficult and challenging than the first demographic dividend. Okay, because in the first demographic dividend, if you have an appropriate size of the people in the labor force, you would get demographic dividend anyway. But the size or the values of the demographic dividend varies according to the human capital of the labor force. Okay, like if let's do like this. Suppose you are working in a company that would like to recruit only the talented one. Okay, this is a company like Mitsubishi would like to recruit only the talented one. So once they come to work for Mitsubishi, they are very skillful, talented, and productive. So then the Mitsubishi earns lots of money. They can invest and reinvest in everything, and then they pay back, they give salaries to the employees a lot. Okay? Not only salaries, but also the bonus. The bonus varies according to the productivity, right? Suppose this year they can get about 3 times of the salary for bonus. Suppose, let's say, 3,000 yen. Okay, suppose. That is too small, right? What would say? 300,000 yen. Is that enough? Or too small?
It's monthly salary.
Monthly salary, 10 times of the monthly salary, suppose, and the monthly salary is 3,100 yen. Okay, this is Mitsubishi, right? Comparing with another company, they said any people can come to work. Okay, they don't. Talented is not that much because if they get the talented, they have to pay a lot. So that's just ordinary people. And then the people get a salary like 100,000 yen per month. And the bonus they would get like 2 times. This is some kind of dividend they get from the human capital, right? So this is some kind of an implication that suppose this company that doesn't have enough talented people to make the company productive. And this Mitsubishi, if we compare this with a country, they have like employees of the same size, like 20 employees, same, okay, like in the labor force age, the same size of the people in the labor force population. But the quality of the people are different. So a country with the same size of the people in the labor force population wouldn't enjoy the same demographic dividend. The policies to maximize the demographic dividend is only to within that period to encourage them for the HRD, a good HRD. Okay. But for the second demographic dividend, it's too late to have a policies once you become in the aging society. You have to be well prepared years and decades before you come to the aging society. Because the second dividend will take place only in an aging society, right? But the policy, the public sphere is much more difficult and needs more long time to be well prepared. And that kind of policies needs to be taken place when they are in the first demographic dividend. Okay. So the idea is that whatever would be the policy, you have to think far, not a year basis. Not in Thailand, I told you, right? We have 5 years, we have 3 prime ministers, and a yearly policy. This is not good for the demographic dividend, but we need long-term policy. So the idea here is that suppose if we rely on the dominating idea of providing welfare to the elderly, the concept, the notion of the people in the second demographic dividend said that would reduce the second dividend. That wouldn't do any good. Okay, because what? Because if older persons are supported by their adult children, they will probably save less. If older persons are supported by unfunded public pensions, they are also likely to save less. So public support is also needed, but you need some other kind of policies to counterbalance. Otherwise, if you rely on just one public support, the people wouldn't feel like to stand on their own feet, and wouldn't have a chance to save more. So this is the key. So they said transfer compete with the second dividend. Why? Because intergenerational transfer compete with saving or asset accumulation as source of support for old age. So less support of intergeneration or less support of the transfer is better if the second dividend is to be maximized. But transfer may be necessary if we think about the safety net for the poor. Okay, so policymakers should weigh carefully the cost and benefit of public transfer and family transfer. So the public transfer is not something that is good for all. This is the idea. It may be good for the poor society to provide some kind of a safety net, but that is not good for a well-being society because that would do harm to some kind of human capitalizing already. Because as I said earlier, that if you stop work, your brain will die down, right? So just keep on working. You still have to think how many years you have to work, right? So far we would say that population aging is not a cause of alarm. People getting worried so much. Oh, we become aging society. What we should do? We don't have enough financial support. We don't have enough financial resources to deal with the aging society. They say the people from the second demographic dividend perspective said, no. Don't be alarmed. Don't be panicked. Let's make this an opportunity because the aging society can become a good thing. Okay? Only that if we have appropriate policies, appropriate institutions, appropriate program to implement the policies. Okay. And what about the developing Asia? There are ways of hope anyway, because the ASEAN leaders now are thinking about the ASEAN community, and they would like to upgrade the social policies and many kind of policies. They are thinking in terms of the future more than in the old days. This is some kind of a ray of hope. But that hope may not be very shiny if they cannot cope with the challenges. And the challenges are from within and outside the region. One thing is that currently in Southeast Asia, there is not enough effort from within a country and also from within the region to try to maximize the benefits of the demographic dividend, even the first demographic dividend. The effort so far is not enough. We need more and more to learn. This slide shows you again that the big problem in Southeast Asia is the gap in order to be international competitive in the future. And the problem behind this, as I told you earlier, the gap here is what? The problem of the gap here is the gap in terms of human development, the gap in terms of the quality of the people within the region. Okay, this one is not very serious because we adopt some kind of a similar policies that we learn from one another. But this one, the gap is getting wider and wider. Okay. Not only wider between countries, but also wider among the groups of population within a nation. The poor, within the country, there is a gap of human development between the rich society and the poor society, the urban area and the rural area. Thailand, for example, if you would like to go to school, people would like to, for higher education, they would try to choose Chulalongkorn University as first priority in all disciplines. But Chulalongkorn University is in central Bangkok. They don't trust other higher institutions of higher education. That they would, once they become graduate, they would be like those who are graduate from Chulalongkorn University. This is something. The case is much worse when you go and take a look at the primary schools. The quality of the schools in remote area are much lower and lower when comparing to primary schools in Bangkok, something. This is also the case when you compare the human capital or the people, human resources in Singapore comparing to Laos PDR. This is the case that something that the big gap, the gap is becoming wider and wider. Okay. So this is a serious case for Southeast Asia. So Asia is very varied, as I said. Okay. The effort so far that we need to do something. Okay. I'd like to go a bit faster. Regional cooperation should be a highlight for not only for the particular nation to do something, but we also need some kind of regional cooperation to upgrade the productivity and the quality of the human resources in order to minimize the burden. Okay, and then we also need some kind of appropriate institutional support. Otherwise, if we just have a good policy and we don't have appropriate institutional mechanism, the demographic dividend wouldn't be maximized anyway. So the key idea for ASEAN is that they should move up together rather than separately struggle. Thank you. So any questions so far? Okay. Questions and comments are welcome.
defines one competency.
Competency.
You know, why people in a country human capitalizing themselves and have to compete in one society. You know, should have good knowledge, good English speaking skill, or whatever. But they also have to cooperate in a public sphere.
Yes.
Then how should we define the one competency?
Okay. This terms of competence and competency, I would it would be in my lecture in May 14. Okay, but anyway, to give you an idea, the term, there are different two terms, competence and competency. The competency is the qualification, the skills that you need to do for when you are working. Like you need to have a good mathematics skill, you need to have computerizing to access to internet and things like that. Or if you are in an engineer, you need to have a good knowledge of engineering perspective. But competence is something that to be then overall from a macro perspective. Like you need to be, if you have a good competence, you can basic to go anywhere. You need, like the EU, they have 8 competence requirements. One is to be good citizenship. Second one is to be like proficient in foreign languages. Another would be like a critical thinking skill. Not just a thinking skill, but critical thinking. This is something that they say a good qualification for you to survive in the future times. So this is something the difference between competence and competencies. The demographic dividend, the public sphere and the internet sphere. Normally, in developing countries, they wouldn't care, they wouldn't think about what should be the competence or competencies, because the competencies would be some kind of a policy of a business people, business company to think what they want. And if you are fit in the qualification, you can be recruited. But in the EU, they try to communicate both public sphere and internet sphere that both come together. We need some kind of a macro qualifications for the European people as basic qualification, eight qualifications that you will see in the lecture in May 14. Okay, and then this would be to complement the competencies, which is requirements by the business people, business circle. So it should be complement to one another. Yes. Okay. Any other? I think we. Yes.
Question. You are very pessimistic about the human resource development in Thailand.
Yes.
So I'd like to know the reason why. Because I saw many people like medical healthcare professionals, they're really good. So this is one.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is that you are talking about underemployment.
Mm-hmm.
Is this related to overcrowded, highly educated people in comparison to this industry structure? This is second.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, to gain the second dividend,
Mm-hmm.
well, actually, we need not only highly skilled people, but also we need low skilled people, like for the maintenance of the society.
Yes.
Not only professionals, but also we need farmers and cleaners or all the kind of sorts of jobs.
Yeah.
So to gain the second dividend,
Mm-hmm.
how can they make the second dividend?
Yes, for the lower?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Let me start with the first one. The first one, Thailand, we have talented people. We have the creams, the brains, but they are just small of them, small size of them, not many of them. If you compare with the majority of the Thai population in the labor force now, 60% of them have only primary education so far. 60% of them. And those who are the talented, who obtain a degree after the graduate degrees, is about, I would say, no more than 15% of the population. And among them, the cream of these 15%, I would say about 7%. But we do have really good cream, good talented people. But we need more and more. If we have this to be multiplied by more than 10 times, that would be better. Okay. And for the second dividend, for the unskilled or semi-skilled, is to how to encourage them to increase their income and to have accumulate their wealth. They can do that in an open society. They have to, like, they can export, or they can rice farmers that they can produce rice and export to places. What is needed for them is some kind of an appropriate ways of producing in a good quality. Okay, one thing is we call standard, not really a standard, but some kind of a good way of practice when they do job. In Thailand, Vietnam, we are trying to have some kind of occupational skill standard, which also comes down to those in the semi-skilled and low-skilled also. If they maintain the standard is not how to do this and that in a good way, but also in terms of how to do things that doesn't have negative effect on the society, or to let them be injured while they are working also. This is one thing that we are trying to do. And another thing you said, the second question is?
The underemployment issue,
yes.
is it because of overcrowdedness of the highly educated people?
No, that is not the case. The underemployment, the problem in Thailand is the role of the business, the entrepreneurs, the business community that is trying to take advantage of the people. They know that these people has got a bachelor degree in this and that, but they said, oh, we don't have enough this kind of we cannot pay you that much money. So if you need a job, you have to do this and that. You have to accept this kind of salary. This is the case for both local business and multinational business. So it's kind of something that the people there in the business, they lack some kind of ethics. And lately, some kind of code of ethics in business are a highlight that we are trying to install in the some kind of business governance, but not very much effective yet, because many of the people in the business are also becomes in the political circles. So once we have an idea to do this, when they get to the parliament, they will say no to the policy or whatever. So sometimes we have a good policy, but it takes more than 4 years to make it enforced or implemented. the time is over. Is that so? Yes. Or any other questions? If you hesitate to ask in the class, I'll still be available for you to ask. My office is in the another building. I'm in the 4th floor, room 477.